Alright, this video will be basically what happened after we went home. So we went home, I think the 20th? I think the 20th. I can't remember. And then we had to go back to the hospital because his jaundice level was really high, I guess. We went to the breastfeeding clinic and they tested his jaundice level, his bilirubin, and it was pretty high. So they called us pretty much right after we left and said, you need to come back to the hospital. He needs to be admitted to basically get the photo treatment or whatever where they put him under the lights. So I took him back to the hospital immediately, and he got put under the lights and all that stuff. He had to start an IV because he was pretty dehydrated. He just, my milk wasn't in. He wasn't getting very much. So we went back to the hospital and they started him on that, and they gave him an IV. They made me feel so terrible. He was so dehydrated, it was really hard for them to get an IV started. They poked him probably a good 10 times trying to get the IV started. At least 2 times in each hand, 4 in his head, some in his arm. And I think they even tried his foot. So they finally got one in his head, so he had an IV coming out of his head. It was just like right in the middle. Kind of looked like a unicorn. He did really well with it. I mean, he cried and I felt terrible, but he just did really well with it. So he was there, and then, we weren't too worried about the jaundice thing. We figured it would go down, after being there. Of course, it sucks being there for 24 hours, because that's what they predicted we would be there for, and that's about what we were there for. But while we were there, they noticed that he was kind of breathing funny. So they started him on albuterol every 4 hours, and like respiratory was coming in to see him, and all kinds of stuff. And they finally figured out that was just that they probably didn't clean him up good enough. He basically had like snot in his nose, and that's why he couldn't breathe very well, and he was just breathing really, really crazy. So once they cleaned him out, his nose out and everything better, his breathing went back to normal. But before they did that, they had ordered an echocardiogram before they figured that out, just to check if there was anything wrong. And then they noticed that he, after we ruled out that there was nothing wrong with his breathing, the results came back and they said that there's possibly a hole in his heart, and also that he has a heart murmur. So that was, of course, really hard to hear. We have to worry about that, and I had no idea what that meant. I mean, I didn't know what the possibilities are with that, if it was going to be serious or not. You just don't know. And so then they made us an appointment with a pediatric cardiologist. They did let us go home, so I figured it can't be that terrible. Once I talked to him, they said that it could be something where it has to be closed. It could be something that absolutely doesn't affect him at all. It could be something that he just needs antibiotics before, like a dental procedure. I mean, it could be something very, very simple. He could need surgery to close it. I mean, they didn't know. And they said that they weren't even sure that it was a hole in his heart. It just, the picture wasn't that great. So the pediatric cardiologist that read it was from a city like 2 hours away from us. So we made an appointment with her. And it was for, 3 or 4 days later. So, we were kind of assuming that it can't be that big of a deal if they're letting us go home and they're not worried about seeing us until quite a bit later. So I stayed away from Google. I basically stayed away from the computer. I didn't want to look it up and try and figure out anything until I knew if it was even an issue. So then we, took him home. He didn't have any problems. He was, they said to look for him, not eating very well, turning like a gray color, or having like blue lips, or, really like blue feet and stuff like that, sweating, just stuff like that that could be some sort of heart trouble. And he had nothing like that the entire time we were at home. You know, of course I was overly checking him, it seemed like, but you know, he had no signs of any problems. So finally Wednesday comes along and we go to that appointment and they redo the echocardiogram, and you know, of course we're just sitting there. You know, those techs don't tell you anything, which I know they're not supposed to, but you know, it's nerve-wracking just sitting there, you know, for, it takes about 20-30 minutes for them to do that test, and just sitting there and just waiting, and then you have to wait for the results from the doctor. But you know, this time we were seeing the doctor right after the test, so it wasn't, you know, as nerve-wracking as it was before. But when she came in, the first thing she said was, there's nothing wrong with him. So it was, you know, a complete and total relief. You know, of course we were stressing out. It's just like one thing after the other. You know, first of all, his breathing's wrong. Then he has a hole in his heart. And then he has a heart murmur. And she said there's nothing wrong. He has just a small murmur. But apparently, she said about 80% of kids have it, and it usually just either goes away, and even if it doesn't, it's harmless. So, you know, that was, of course, great news. And she just was like, I'm sorry, you know, we wasted your time and all that. And it's just like, it's, you know, nice to know that there's nothing wrong. You know, it doesn't matter that we drove, you know, a couple hours, you know, who cares? So that's why I've kind of been a little slow to update. I honestly just wasn't in the mood to, you know, put all that out there until I knew for sure. So now I should do updates a little more often now. So nothing wrong with him. He's perfectly healthy, and I mean, seems pretty happy. So other than that, I think that's about it. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.